This is augforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Paya. Paya offers Acumatica users a suite of industry-leading payment orchestration tools. Far beyond native Acumatica payments, Paya enables EMV, NFC terminals for counter sale. They offer a frictionless customer portal through their click-to-pay solution, and they support most e-commerce platforms and point-of-sale solutions used with Acumatica, such as One Retail and AcuPOS. And best of all, omni-channel reconciliation is available for all of their solutions. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is 24/7 Digitize. 24/7 Digitize is an Acumatica bookkeeping service provider that helps derive the best value from your Acumatica investment by maintaining your books utilizing Acumatica's best practices and guidelines. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. I mean guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Wednesday, April 26th, 2023, and this is episode number 108 with Ryan Brown and Dakota Clum. And we're going to be talking about Acumatica hosting and data access. So, Ryan, you've probably heard him on the podcast before. We also did a live broadcast during the pandemic, and then he disappeared to go into some non-Acumatica things, but now you're back. So maybe we could start off with you, Ryan, and tell us why you're back on the podcast here.
Yeah, so yeah, very active in the Acumatica community up till about a year and a half ago, and then I think we did like a little kickoff thing for me back then. I just had to kind of try out some new venture. It was just that I still believe in it. It was a great mortgage and real estate venture. I think the company's going to go places, but it's funny. Sometimes you've got to leave a community to figure out how much you really love it. And so when I left, I'm like, you know what? I love the technology space. So after a while, I was like, okay, I'm not. This is not my passion, and at this point, I want to chase passions. And so started talking to the owners of XByte, and they were doing a new venture with hosting and managed services. And so we started chatting, and yeah, they brought me into it, and we got Dakota with us as well today. He's one of my partners in crime on this venture. He's the CTO for XByte Hosting.
Yeah, Dakota, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and what's going on with you at XByte Hosting?
Yeah, absolutely, Tim, and thanks for having me on today. So, a little bit of my background, I'm very passionate about cloud services or enabling organizations to adopt cloud services. My background consists of traditional hosting companies and getting customers moved from legacy environments into modernized cloud applications and cloud platforms.
Cool. Yeah, and so, for people who don't even know what Xbyte is, maybe Ryan, you could dip a little further back into your history. You were the CEO at Xbyte before going off to your venture. Sounds like you got ERP in your blood. You just couldn't resist, being in more of the guts of a company. Maybe tell us what Xbyte is and how Xbyte hosting, is it a separate company and how it complements regular Xbyte?
Yeah, so Xbyte Technologies was the original company, and they specialized in the on-prem infrastructure, and specifically in the Dell environment. So they had expertise in that. They've been doing it for about 20 years, and really knew that on-prem space. And they had an opportunity to partner and kind of branch off into some additional brands, and they brought Dakota and some of the other people within the Xbyte hosting company right now. They brought all them together, and they spun off Xbyte hosting. So the Xbyte hosting, we also have Xbyte Solutions, is another brand underneath of Xbyte. So hosting is going to do your traditional, your VPS environments, your dedicated servers. It's going to have that. We also have backup as a service to kind of complement some of the Xbyte technologies customers who are doing on-prem and need a cloud backup of things. Then we also have Xbyte Solutions, which is going to do more of your managed services. So they're going to take care of anybody who's doing any Azure, any AWS infrastructures. Maybe a customer needs a specific feature in one of those public clouds, and so that we can help manage that. We can also do with people who are doing any kind of hybrid environments or even just an on-prem environment. We can do any combinations of on-site or cloud deployments as well.
So it'd be fair to say that like Xbyte hosting is a little more focused on the hardware, whereas Xbyte solutions a little more focused on the software.
Solutions is on doing the services side of things, and then hosting is going to be the actual infrastructure.
Okay. Hardware and software and
Hmm.
infrastructure. Okay.
Correct.
So if you use something else for your infrastructure like AWS, then solutions would still be involved to help you manage those services. A lot of people think, oh, I just spin up an AWS server, right? They take care of everything. Actually, they don't. It's just another computer that you don't see, right? Or maybe I'm
Yeah,
wrong on that. You could
I-
say more.
I'll let Dakota go on this. We just actually we did our own YouTube video about this very subject, so I'll let him go off on really what you don't get when you get your own AWS instance.
Sure. Yeah, it's AWS is great for spinning up something fast, quick, and efficiently. Everything that happens after that is really in your hands. So I think what I've seen a lot in the industry is people think it's deploy once and forget. You actually have to manage your updates, be aware of any security vulnerabilities, ensure, your system is right sized to meet your performance needs. Um, and in addition to that, you're also kind of lacking immediate support options. So that's another, element that's not available to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And um, it seems like what how do you see things kind of playing out in the future? Do you see things like, so here's the specific thing going through my head right now. The inflationary pressure on Amazon AWS, right? So prices are going up. I think I haven't seen the Acumatica price list, but they're hosted on AWS and they have to reflect the price increases they're seeing. On the hardware, so what I'm wondering is, do you still see like on-prem future with specifically with Xbyte? Is there reasons to still have your own hardware so that is it cheaper, or do you really see the future being AWS and you're just managing services on it?
From my standpoint, from what I've seen is that a lot of times your business is going to go through sort of peaks where it makes sense to go with more of a cloud adoption. And then as that expense may start to get too high, you may see reason to go to an on-prem, because at that point it's like, oh, you know what? I'm spending thousands of dollars per month or tens of thousands of dollars per month. I could bring that. I could afford my own engineers at that point to manage an on-prem infrastructure. And so at that point, you then start to look at, okay, hey, what can we bring on-prem to cut down some of those costs? And then you get into more of a hybrid environment where those workloads that make sense to have in the cloud are in the cloud, and those resources that make sense to have on-prem, where you can cut some of those costs, maybe easier to manage, will move on-prem. So I just talking to a company the other day who's doing just that. So they their AWS bill was getting too high. Was in actually, I think, for more than the tens of, I think it was closer to more than $100,000 a month, and they were looking to kind of shave some of that expense. So they identified certain workloads like, hey, we're going to bring this back in house, because for the cost of 1 year, um, we can afford the hardware, and then we can then it's just the management of that, year over year, and that can and people are keeping on-prem hardware longer and longer. And even in the hosting world, hosting companies are keeping their infrastructure static as well for longer periods of time. So the servers are just lasting longer. So they're able to it's not a 3-year refresh anymore. It's more of 5 or 7 year refreshes, but on-prem. So there's definitely going to be a world for both in that hybrid environment where, I mean, some workloads, if you're in an environment where you're going to have people all over the country, you may need to have that, um, in an environment that's in the cloud, because you're like, you know what, if my primary goes down, I can't have my other facilities go down. So maybe that makes sense to be in the cloud, or you may have to make certain allowances to have it at a primary facility. So we've talked to companies who are doing, where they all failover to that we've talked to them both ways, either a failover to the cloud or cloud then failover to a primary. It's because cloud also goes down. I mean, I just heard, I'm sure all the Acumatica people were sad to see NetSuite go down for temporarily. Um, that really put frowns on their face to see that. But yeah, you hear all these big guys that no one's really safe. There are going to be some outages.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. As much as there's been such a marketing push around cloud, right? Trendy cloud. It's just a computer that's somewhere else, right? And the analogy I always think of is buying a house. I mean, there's a reason why people buy a house instead of renting an apartment, right? It's like economies of scale, like you were talking about. You get to a certain size, it makes sense to have your own engineer, to have your own infrastructure, but maybe not for everything. So then you get into hybrid, and that's where I'm sure it gets complicated. That's where you really need someone who knows that world, who can assess when it makes sense for this particular thing to be in the cloud versus being on-prem. And I could see how, that's why a company like Xbyte can, doing all those, doing the services, doing the hardware, knowing that whole world would be a great company to partner with when you're having those challenges.
Yeah, even from the simple stuff is just understanding where your backups. You can save you can save money by putting certain backups into slower storage, like a Glacier from Amazon, compared to, more mission critical, which you may need to be able to have the be up and running a lot faster. So you want to have those with some sort of either a DR on demand, or a true DR. So that's something that we talk about a lot with backups, is that we have kind of DR on demand, because our VPS environments is located next to or near, um, in the same data center uh, our hosting, our VPS environment is located with our backup as a service. So you can fail over to a VPS pretty quickly on doing local transfers of that data, as opposed to trying to do it over the wire.
So I didn't understand all of that, but what I catch is you guys know what you're talking about, and I just deal with software. But maybe we could pick on Acumatica SaaS for a minute here. You don't have to pick on them too hard, but for me it doesn't matter. It matters more, but let's pick on Acumatica SaaS. So some challenges I see right now, with any SaaS provider. One is you don't get direct access to the data, right? Two, and you alluded to this earlier, from a services side, that support, they're buried right now, right? Acumatica is growing so fast that support is a little more challenging. And so, maybe talk about challenges with any SaaS provider, with Acumatica SaaS, and reasons why a company might want to at least explore going to another hosting option with their Acumatica infrastructure.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll talk about with any environment is you're going to want to right size that. And actually, as much as I can talk about the subject, I'm only 5 months into my hosting career, so so I lean on my experts that we have in house. So I just I get to be the kind of megaphone for the great teachings they've given me. But I'll kind of pass to Dakota for a second to talk about the right sizing process that we go through with customers.
Yeah. So right sizing is really important for any enterprise SaaS application. What we want to make sure customers have in our hosted environment is resources available during their peak times, and that they're not over provisioned or under provisioned. So oftentimes we've seen scenarios, where every day between 12 and 1, they just get a client will get a huge boost in traffic, and you want to make sure their server's prepared to handle that. If there's something going on, like a big batch job every day at 3 a.m. and the server's bogging down, and there's a lot of resource utilization, you're going to want a hosting provider that can monitor that and tune the application in real time. So yeah, we work with our customers on hey, what's your peak performance look like? What's your peak utilization? And let's right size your solution to be able to handle that at any time. And that's a part of our onboarding process. But again, it's not a done and forget. We check in with our customers, monthly, sometimes even daily, on how that resource performance is doing, so they can continue operating their applications.
So right sizing is specifically like about your max utilization, or it's just about your utilization in general?
A little bit of both. So, obviously knowing what your peak utilization could look like or what your projections are is really important, because when that day comes, you want to make sure you can handle the workload. If you have slower months or you're downtrending, our services and solutions have the ability to scale back as well. So, we'll really grow with companies based on their needs and utilization.
And what are the key things you look for? So in my simple mind, I know about CPU, processing power. I know about RAM, memory. Other than those two things, what are the resources that people utilize and that need to be monitored?
Well, great job. You nailed two of the major components, which is RAM and CPU. Storage is an important one. So you have I/O read operations. If there's a lot of indexing happening on the server, especially one that's SQL Server intensive, there's some performance aspects you need to monitor there. You have bandwidth utilization at the network layer. What kind of traffic's coming in? Is any of it junk? A lot of these SaaS applications have a login system. Is there bad traffic hitting that a million times a day when they shouldn't be? So we really partner, with our clients at every layer of the stack. So network, bandwidth, RAM, CPU, compute, disk, you name it, and we can help organizations scale from there to best meet their needs.
And I'll jump something into some Acumatica specific pieces is that when you control your SQL environment, then you can, if you're adding in custom fields that are generally searched for a lot in your environment, you can add in the indexes you need on the tables, because you have access to all of that. So I know that you can, at least I've heard that you can request that from the Acumatica support team if you think you need to have indexes added, but this one gives you that full control of anytime you need to, you can add that index, and you can then, as I said, you have access to all of that. You can, if you have control of your VPS environment, you can also, Tim, you and I have talked about doing any kind of BI. So you can get into, hey, look, I can now have my Excel pull in my data via SQL as opposed to being an OData. And if anyone's ever done OData before and you're dealing with large record sets, that can be very slow.
Or
So,
impossible? Yeah,
or yeah,
just
or yeah, or,
bombs. Yeah.
or crashes.
I got to
So,
throw in there Data Self's ETL Plus tool is a good way to incrementally refresh. But yeah, it's still slow. The pipeline is just slow, right? Yeah.
now does data self, are they caching the OData feeds?
My understanding of it is that they're using, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this, they use the last modified date. So that, and
Okay.
Felixo does the
Yep.
same thing
Same
for their
thing.
smart refresh. So
Yep.
every record in Acumatica's got a last modified. So you grab it like it batches, and then you know what you need to grab next based on your last modified.
Yeah. So it's funny. I've run some tests because when we were first looking at it at Xbyte in the past, as I was running the company, and even now, when others are, they're heavy users of Excel in doing data analysis. And we'll of course get a pull in your Acumatica data. And we tested, okay, let me do it via SQL, let me do it via OData, and it was a night and day difference. I mean, as Tim was saying, large data sets will just crash on OData, where SQL it'll take a few seconds, but it's as long as it's properly indexed, it'll come up pretty quickly. So you have that advantage if you're doing any kind of business intelligence. The if you're not running like a Velixo or a data self, where you have that kind of caching capabilities within those data sets. So that's one of the advantages you have as far as access to that information. You can plug it into anything you want to, but because by having that, so we're interesting at Xbyte because we're one of the few companies running it on prem, so we really have access and SQL, where it's on a local network, so it's even faster when you're doing that. But yeah, even if you VPS, I mean, you could just log into your VPS, I guess, if you needed to get that local access to SQL and still get some of that performance if you had larger data sets. So you
You
could
said VPS a few times, but I actually do not know what that stands for. Help me out.
ah See, it's see hanging out with Dakota and the gang at Expert Hosting. I've gotten too used to throwing acronyms around, and it's funny. We just came out of a meeting where we were in front of our sales team, and we defined all these terms. And so, Dakota, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of these descriptions, but I'll throw out a few terms for you. So the when you're talking about hosted environments, there's really three key ones that you look at. It's shared hosting, it's VPS, and that's virtual private server, and there's also dedicated, which is kind of like you're renting a server that's just co-located at some facility.
A physical machine that's yours, the
Correct.
entire.
Yeah,
Whereas a
dedicated is that.
virtual, so VPS, it's like separate operating system that you get access to, but you're sharing the hardware with other virtual machines. Is that right?
Correct. We over provision, so you're guaranteed your resources. So in a shared environment, you're basically on a machine with a pool of, I don't know, 300 people, and if somebody if somebody eats up all the resources, you go down. So
Which is Acumatica SaaS environments, if I understand it
is it
correctly.
really?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So you got the back in my
In probably the common case, I'm sure
yeah.
that it depends on the situation, but yeah.
So I remember back many years ago in my old ERP days at Everest, we talked to people about the NetSuite California rush. So NetSuite would slow down at around 11 o'clock Eastern time because you're like, all right, we're starting to get California starting to come online. Zoom. It just slows down for a little bit as I'm not sure how they load balanced in the days, but nowadays you probably have like some Docker instances creating some containers or something. But yeah, so it would slow down. So in your so in a shared instance, that's the problem. In your VPS, you're guaranteed resources. We're basically virtualizing using. I'll just speak in generally. VPS, they're using some sort of virtualization software to virtualize environments, similar to where if you were to do that yourself, but you are guaranteed those resources, and we over provision to ensure that that we have the resources for people on those boxes. So that's the difference between shared. The VPS is really just your guaranteed resources and a little more control security of things. No one else is going to take you down, or at least the chances of that are extremely slim. Dedicated, even more secure, but you don't get um, uh, some of the backups that you do have with VPS. So with VPS, you're going to have multiple. You're being a cluster. So if there's any kind of hardware failure, is absorbed by the cluster, and you don't feel it as an end user. In a dedicated space, if you're dedicated on a single box and that box is a hardware failure, you're feeling it because it's your box.
How did he do, Dakota? Did he do a good job of describing that?
Ryan, you did amazing. So great work there.
Yeah, Dakota was telling us stories about other environments, past jobs he's worked at, a deal in shared, and that was 80% of their support tickets was shared. So that's why when they came on board, they told us we don't want to do shared because that's a headache.
So, Xbite, I think, is an interesting position because you are an Acumatica customer running Acumatica locally, and now you're into hosting. So, what does the future look like for you about Acumatica specifically? Is that something you're looking to get into hosting Acumatica for Acumatica customers? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're exploring, both with individual clients as well as partners. So if partners don't already have a if partners don't already have a hosting practice on their own, I know a lot of the partners may have that, but not all of them do. So if new partners need to have that, we definitely are looking to work with them to be able to provide that complete solution to their customers. Or if a larger one has a hosting practice and they don't want to deal with managing it, we can partner with them to kind of take over some of that if they want to, or even be an extra layer of support for them. So sometimes they may not have seen something before, they can lean on us, or if they just need an extra resource, so that if they only have a couple people and they both are on vacation, they need that sort of an extra person backup, we can provide that as well. So we're kind of flexible in that. But yeah, we are very interesting. We've always been interesting for Acumatica because we were an on-prem hardware provider running Acumatica at first, and so that was always interesting. And now we're hosting. So neither of which I guess are really make Acumatica excited.
Right.
um, um, but I mean, Acumatica, we also will support AWS and Azure environments. So if for any of those AWS customers of Acumatica's, we can support those as well. So we don't want to convert everybody unless
Yeah,
they
and
want
what
to.
about, the partners that you've talked to, keeping this very general and vague so that no one's getting called out? What's your sense in general of the appetite for um, hosting more? And I'll say a little bit more about this. I think it's interesting, excuse me, that if you go like decade by decade, maybe go back to like the 1960s and 1970s. You start off with the mainframe centralized processing, right? Then you go into the 1980s and 90s and you go to more of a client server. Then the 2000s, you go back to more of the centralized cloud processing. Well, now even Acumatica with their new UI and .NET Core is, in my opinion, making a shift back to client server, and that they're trying to push a lot more of the processing into the browser because the machines got most people's machines have plenty of resources, and the IIS web server is becoming a bottleneck. And so that's just sort of the trend, right? They just swing back and forth. And I think I think we've hit the peak of cloud and we're sort of swinging back into hybrid more, et cetera. So I'm just curious, the sense you get talking to partners. Is there an appetite as people have maybe hit the peak of their excitement about all cloud all the time? Is there some appetite for more of a hybrid environment?
Yeah, I don't know if the hybrid. The partners I've talked to, for the most part, are still cloud. So they're not looking to bring Acumatica necessarily on-prem, but they want to be able to help manage the infrastructure for their customers. So they realize that there's some revenue, but it really comes down to revenue. I don't want to say that. I don't want to put that in a bad light. But revenue and customer service. So by providing the infrastructure, be it cloud generally, and a lot of times they're managing. They're not in the game of having their own servers, so they're managing AWS or Azure environments. So they'll manage that for their customers, and so they get a revenue stream from that, and it's recurring revenue, and everyone loves that annual recurring revenue from a company standpoint. But also, they then control that world. So they know, hey, if something happens, they're they're not going to somebody else to say, hey, why is my server down, and relying on them. They own that relationship with the hosting provider and can then push to provide that best customer experience possible. And so that's why I see a big appetite for them to bring, at least in a general sense, to bring the infrastructure in house, even if that means, and it does mean that for the most part, just managing a public cloud instance.
That makes sense. And I'm curious if it includes this scenario. I'm thinking from a customer service side, which the scenario would be, hey, Acumatica is really slow. It's awful. And actually, the problem is the local network in the building where the people are working. Like, are you guys managing that type of stuff too, or is it just servers?
It's going to be infrastructure as far as the servers go. So if it's
Okay.
managed wherever it is, but we can help. I mean, we have experts in the networking because, I mean, we're as we're hosting, we have our own infrastructure, so our own servers, our own networking, all of that. So we know how to look for bottlenecks, and so we would deploy the same sort of monitoring tools that we have for our own infrastructure to their facility, and do those kind of deep dives to help them figure out where the bottleneck really is. If it is in their network access, if it's their whatever it is, their own network access, if it's on the performance of the server side of things, if it's on SQL tuning, if it's just, hey, my license only allows me access to a certain number of cores or whatever it is, depending on how things look. Um, and yeah, I mean, we've gone through the great thing is we've done that at Xpite. We've looked at our performance and said, hey, we want to get even better performance. Where does the bottleneck exist? And we've looked at things from SQL tuning, to tuning our Acumatica license, and just trying to get the best value. And so we can bring those same discussions and experiences to any customers we work with.
That makes sense. Yeah. So you might not install and manage the network infrastructure, but you at least have the diagnostic tools to help identify where the problem is so you know who to call, what exactly needs to be fixed in the environment.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Again, I think you're in a very unique position being both an Acumatica customer and now having the ability to provide the stuff that you've learned over the last, what, 8 years? How long has XPipe been running Acumatica?
Let's see, 2017, I believe. I believe it was like July
Okay.
5th or
So six
6th.
years?
Yeah, 6 years.
6 years running Acumatica. And yeah, you're just in a very interesting spot to really be able to provide good advice without uh, like good independent advice, right? You're not just towing the common marketing spiel, but you can really talk at a level of detail that is transparent and real. I like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I've um no one, you can't see the video, but by my haircut or lack of hairs to cut, um, it'll tell my age. But yeah, I've been in the ERP space for probably 22 years now. So even though it's Acumatica's only the last 6, it's been 22 years of experience.
So, what about other advantages of, we'll just say, not being on Acumatica SaaS? Other reasons why. We've talked about data access. We've talked about service level. Um, what are some other things that come to mind? I would think ISV products. Things that, so especially an older ISV product that you need to install on a server somewhere. What anything else you can think of for advantages to leaving Acumatica SaaS?
And just you control that environment. So if s- uh, from it, and you're first in line. So I'll bring up an example with Office 365, and we had one time at Xbyte where we were having some connectivity issues or some issues with Office 365, and it was a problem with a bunch of people, of course, not just us. Um, but as far as the fix goes, we were in line with everybody else. We can't light any fires other than saying, "Hey, we're gonna we're gonna move to Google email to Gmail if you don't fix us." And they're like, "Ooh, scary! No one does that." Like, we don't believe that for a second. Um, so you can't do that if you're kind of controlling your own environment. You can be like, "Hey, um, Ryan, you're fired if you can't get us up." So all of a sudden, there's a bigger fire underneath you to get things fixed when it's the actual company you work for, or directly work for if it's a partner situation.
Yeah, I think, when the whole idea of the cloud was newer, it was so mysterious that no one wanted to deal with it at all, right? And I think as time has gone on and people realize more and more as they experience specific issues, they realize more it's just a computer somewhere else. The mystique and the complexity of it starts to fade, right? And they realize, oh, this is something that someone else can do. Acumatica is not the only one who can host Acumatica or whatever the specific thing is, right? And so I think it gets less scary, and that's why I feel like we're swinging back, maybe not heavily, but I just feel like we've reached the peak of just all cloud, all rental, and a little more people being wiser about what specific decisions they make in specific situations, as far as whether it's going to be SaaS or whether it's going to be, I should say cloud versus something outside of a public cloud, right? And that's why I think you're in a cool position to be doing that.
Yeah, actually, I'll lean on Dakota here for a second on something. The for Dakota, if you can give any kind of good stories about in your past where, because Tim had mentioned performance gains and kind of what that looks like. So any, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. So I'll try and mumble a little bit so you can think of a good performance tuning story. But if you can, from a I have many from an on-prem infrastructure standpoint. But if you can go into any performance tuning stories you have, and maybe even give an example to anyone listening to this podcast of some software they can run if they're looking to do their own kind of performance tuning of any cloud environments.
Sure. Yeah. So, a story that immediately comes to mind just based on our earlier discussions with SQL indexing. We've had a client who had a really busy server and they were doing a lot of SQL queries. And we found that those SQL queries that were being used the most actually could be increased by 99% performance wise if we introduce indexes. So that's something we're really familiar with. From a web server standpoint, Apache JMeter is an open source free tooling that you can use to hit your site a million times if you wanted to and see where the bottlenecks are, see what requests took the longest to process. So if it's a specific image file that's taking too long, you would know, or if it's a specific query in your code, you would know. So those are the kind of tuning stories we've been through, and we happy to help customers get through them.
And is Zabbix? I think you mentioned. I always try not to butcher their name. Is that another one that you've used, or that even we use currently?
Yeah, so that's for monitoring. So we do that for like monitoring and incident response. CPU's high, disk utilization, websites down. Zabbix is your best tool for that, and it's free. So
Ooh.
Can you mention the Apache one again? It was Apache. I'm writing it down.
JMeter, and I'll send it in a chat as
JMeter.
well.
So that actually makes me think of another random example here. Um, and I don't, you can chime in if Apache JMeter falls into this category. I don't think it does, but actually had a client I've been working with. They were having some random issues. So basically, I'll describe it this way. You click a button in Acumatica and something should happen. And 90% of the time it does. 10% of the time it doesn't. And it's totally random. So how do we catch it? And how do we know how often it's happening? Because you just click the button whenever you click the button. You don't know really how frequently it happens. So I came up with a Power Automate script. Power Automate used to be called Microsoft Flow. And you can basically tell it, open a web browser, go to the Acumatica site, put in the username, put in the password, press the login button, go to the specific screen that I care about, press the button, then click into the field that returns the text and copy it and put the result in a CSV file. So I did that, and then I just told Power Automate to run in the cloud every 5 minutes. So now we had data, now we could actually see how often it was happening with this 5 minute polling type of thing. The difference there, I think, is that it has to log into Acumatica and do something specific. Is that what Apache ZMeter is, or is Apache more for like just hitting a page and public content type of thing?
Yeah, so it could do like post requests with parameters. So if there was an authentication aspect to the application, that would work as well.
Okay.
I think it even supports like OAuth 2 if it's not a traditional username and password, if it was like a client secret or something of that nature. So it's a really neat tool. I think Power Automate may be seen as a little bit more of a modern approach, but JMeter has been a great, reliable software for load testing for a while. So
Okay,
I
cool.
think you can do everything you described. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always interested in what's out there because to me, it's if you ever did macros in Microsoft Excel a long time ago in VBA code, there's the need now. You just need a macro on a web browser, and you can automate so many things with so many applications being web-based, right? It's a cool
Right.
area,
Absolutely.
but there's different tools kind of depending on the situation. I feel like it's still evolving to have this one like master, the best at doing everything. So I'm always
Chat
curious.
GPT.
It's
And Tim, Tim, I'll tell you. So people listing the Tim and I will go back on some emails back and forth. Um, Actually, before I go into that, Tim, thank you so much for your GI training. We brought on a new ERP admin at XByte, and she sings the praises of of your resources. So,
Oh,
um,
cool. Good. That's the video training course on
yeah,
building generic inquiries and pivot
yeah,
tables. Oh, great.
yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that feedback.
Astra is the name if you recognize Astra,
I do.
ASTRA. So yeah, she sings your praises. Um, the I mean, to be honest, I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that price point. I'm like, oh no, that's so high. And then and we paid list price for it, and she's like, yeah, worth every penny. So
Awesome.
great on that one. But sorry for the little Tim Rodman advertisement in the middle of this.
No apologies necessary.
It's like any good podcast. You got to go to the commercials for a few minutes and then come back. Um, if any other podcasters want to have me on the show, and in the middle of it, I'll talk about their product. Go ahead, we'll do the same thing. But yeah, but but um, going back to Chat GPT, and Microsoft has Copilot now that they've built into a lot of their development products. But with Excel macros, um, as I said, XByte Technologies does a lot of things with Excel and data intelligence within Excel. And so someone asked me, hey, um, we can have somebody spend a couple days doing some manipulations of this data. But they're like, hey, you've been using Chat GPT a lot. Can you, or actually, I'm sorry, they didn't even mention Chat GPT. They just said, hey, we know you're good at Excel macros and stuff. Can you help with something? So I'm like, I don't want to write. I'm like, honestly, there's nobody who's excited to write VBA code. Anybody who's gotten into VBA, nobody is excited to do it. So I'm like, oh, do I want to write another? And we need to have video because you can't see the hand on my head just in pain at writing a VBA script. Um, so my hand on my head, I'm like, okay. I started exploring Chat GPT. So I'm like, okay, Chat GPT. I'm like, hey, I need this script to do this manipulation, and here's this page, and kind of explained everything I needed. I'm like, go. I'm like, oh, and he or she or whatever 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 sex you want to give to Chat GPT spits out, here you go. And I was like, oh, okay, sweet. Took it, did a couple little tiny tweaks, and what would have taken me maybe an hour and a half or two, it took 2 minutes, and it was better
Interesting.
at writing code than I could have been. I was like, wow, these are very efficient ways of writing code. So
Interesting.
yeah, I think Excel macros. I've heard someone mentioned that I think Copilot with Power Automate is going to be a big piece. So you could almost because you can use you can use speech to text. So you could use speech to text to just talk to your computer. It would write out what you need to Chat GPT, and it would spit out your Power Automate scripts, and it would actually configure it all for you. And they said that's coming to
Very
Excel
interesting.
to configure your, if you want to do your Power BI within Excel. It could do that sort of stuff, and so it's gonna be amazing. A little Xbyte Solutions plug. We're posting a video pretty soon where I worked on a prompt. It was Dakota's idea. He's a smart one. I just kind of do some stuff.
You take the credit for it.
but his idea to get a prompt for Chat GPT to interview me. So I'm like, hey, I had to work on it, but I'm like, hey, look at our website, xbytehosting.com, and pretend like you're a reporter. I want you to ask me 5 questions and like wait for a response after each question, and then listen to what I say and ask me one follow up per main question you ask. And there's some testing on the prompts to get it to pause properly, because the first time it pretended it was also me, and it's like, oh hey, I say this and then you say this. I'm like, no, 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 no. I know my answers. I just need you to ask me the questions to make a cool video. Um, so I had to play with that a little bit, and I showed somebody the result, and they said, hey, that's actually a great way for anybody who's going to be interviewed by somebody to practice. So
Interesting.
you prompt ChatGPT to interview you, and it'll give you practice being in that type of environment, so you're not as nervous when you're answering questions, because you don't tell it the questions to ask. It uses AI, look at your website, may know your company, to understand what questions to ask you. And so
Wow.
as a subject of the interview, I was nervous because I'm like, I have no idea what it's going to ask me. I'm recording this. Um, so it's like, okay, here's my answer. I'm like, hey, what's the follow up? Okay, wow, that was a good follow up. Okay, here's my answer. I'm like, great question, Chat GPT.
You've got this video out there already, or are you
Um,
going to?
the so we're gonna cut it up, but because of the way I had to do the screen for Chat GPT, it didn't work well to within Canva to cut it up, which is the software we use for some of our video editing. So we're actually going to do this week, probably today or tomorrow. I've got to take the video, put it into StreamYard, which plug for StreamYard, love StreamYard. Tim showed me that last time we worked together. But
We're
yeah,
using it to record this episode right now.
yeah, using it to record the episode. So a lot of plugs for things. But yeah, so I'm going to use StreamYard. I'm going to play the video within StreamYard and kind of do some commentary. So kind of like a
Interesting.
modern day Mystery Science Theater 3000 for all those fans
Yeah,
from years
yeah.
ago. So yeah,
So I guess what I'm curious is you will see the Chat GPT prompt running during the interview.
correct. So you
Oh,
see the very
cool.
first screen is just the me giving it the base prompt
Oh, cool.
to know, hey guys, this is not me taking a Chat GPT chat, giving it my questions that I want to ask me. This
Yeah,
is, I'm off the cuff. I don't know what it's going to ask me. And so
interesting.
I found software plugins that will read you the text, and then I found plugins that will do speech to text. And so it's what you see is an actual conversation between me and the computer. It's not where I'm typing it in or something like that. I hear the audio and I respond with my audio.
Interesting and creepy at the same time. Wait, when you say plugin, you mean Chat GPT plugin or just browser plugin
Browser
that does it?
plugin.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, cool. Well, once you have that link, I'd love to drop it on this episode
Yeah.
page at augforums.com/episode 108. Cool. Very cool.
It's a
Yeah.
much better
So,
number
you
than
know,
my episode 13, I think I was on.
yeah. So, you also, when I saw your email on helping to write Excel, I didn't pick up that you were talking about macros. I thought you were talking about Excel formulas. Are you also using it for regular Excel formulas too? Or did I miss that?
Um, I think I've
Mostly
used it for
macros.
mostly macros. I think I've used it for one Excel formula. I mean,
Okay.
I'm pretty well versed in the Excel formulas to kind of put together things, but um, yeah, I've Chat GPT, and we could go for a whole nother podcast on Chat GPT and the uses of it. But it was funny in the early days of it. Um, I asked it, I'm like, hey, what are some Valentine's ideas for my wife? I'm like, we've been
Uh-oh.
married
You
for a certain
should
number
you
of
shouldn't
years.
say this on this.
It's
Okay.
good. It's good. I didn't.
Okay.
it. So when people think of it, oh, ChatGPT can do things for you. Microsoft, I think, has it spot on. It's Copilot. it can help you brainstorm stuff like that. Just like writing code, I would never trust its code completely. I look it over. I'm like, okay, hey, I want to tweak it here and here, do things, especially variable names. But I was like, oh, hey, what are some Valentine's ideas? And then it gave a bunch of them, and one of them was write a love letter. And so someone actually asked me, hey, could you write a love letter? I'm like, I don't know, let me try it. So it actually wrote a love letter to my wife, Jesse. If you're listening, I never send it to you. We
That's
never
why I
have,
said be careful.
but yeah. So it wrote this love letter, and it's pretty good.
Huh.
It's So I've done things with my kids where they will create their own characters, and they'll say, "Hey, ChatGPT, here's what my character is, and let's create a 2,000 word story about these characters, and this is the dilemma they're in. The other night they were fighting some evil chicken nuggets. So I think there was like a flying banana, a cobra who could crush things with its mind, or and partnered with um, a potato wearing a ball gown and high heels. And they were the superheroes battling these evil chicken nuggets. And ChatGPT came up with a 2,000 word story. And then we used the text to speech to read it out loud, and the kids were dying. It was hilarious. So yeah.
That is interesting. So as you're talking about this, I've been thinking about ChatGPT more in the realm of writing code, doing stuff that computers are good at. I hadn't thought it, you know, I'm behind on ChatGPT. Hadn't thought about the creative side. So the interview thing is interesting to me because a lot of times you just need a second pair of eyes on something, right? And I hadn't thought about it as being just a sounding board for stuff. And I'm as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about I wonder how it would behave in a business process improvement type of a situation. I wonder if you could describe a business process and if it's a computer, right? So it should be really good at improving things, right? It'd be kind of interesting to give that a whirl.
Now, with 3.5, which was the earlier version of ChatGPT, I tried to have it do some Acumatica coding, and it was way off. I've asked it some Acumatica questions, and it relies too much on just general knowledge about ERP and coding. So um, I think I asked it, "Hey, I want to format this this um, this GI field." And we all know from formatting GI fields, at least up till more, I haven't seen the 2023 versions, but 2022 and before, your formatting was basically you tell it which schema field to base it on. You can't actually give it a format. Acumatic, if you're listening, Tim, you may have seen this in 23. It'd be amazing if it was there, but royal pain.
Yeah,
Um,
please add a format field
oh my
to
God.
generic inquiries. Yes.
So yeah, so I asked it, I'm like, oh, hey, how can I do this? And it's like, oh yeah, go to the format where you'd think it would be.
I
And
experienced the same thing over the weekend. I asked it to create a generic inquiry, and it will actually spit out instructions. Go to the screen, go to this tab, and it does it. It gets some things right, but on format, it's still messed up. Yep, I tried that over the weekend.
like, you're like, it should be there. Acumatica, ChatGPT thinks it's there. Why do you not have it?
ChatGPT can like get extra votes on the Acumatic idea set because it's supposed to be smarter than the rest of us. Well, that's cool. That's very interesting. I don't know how we got there from hosting, but I think that's really cool.
I think we're like Excel macros and all this kind of stuff. But yeah.
Well, while we're on the tangent side, you mentioned this before we hit record. I'll throw out the AccuSQL thing that I dropped on LinkedIn last night. So I um I came into an office today, and so I'm at a client all day today. I've just taken a break for the podcast, and I asked the guy in
Do
the
they know you're
office that I'm
doing
sitting in.
this?
Yes, they do. Yeah, yeah, no
Shh.
problem, no
Okay.
problem.
I won't
Um,
whisper anymore. Okay.
but I asked the guy that I'm in the office with if he could be my sponsor. I said I've got an addiction to my LinkedIn post that I made last night. Like I came in late because I was responding to some stuff this morning. I'm like, my goal is to make it through the whole day without checking that LinkedIn post. I'll check it tonight. So far, so good. But I dropped that on LinkedIn just to see what people thought. So far, as of this morning, good feedback. And basically, the idea is it's not an idea. I've got it in my hands now. I can write SQL in Acumatica and get results back. So it ties into this whole hosting discussion we've talked about. I still think nothing beats having a hosted environment that you have access to, because you can run the SQL Management Studio or whatever you want to query the database directly. But for most Acumatica customers, they're still on Acumatica SaaS and they can't do that. So I now have a product that I'm calling AcuSQL that gives you a query window, and you can type SQL in there and get results back in a grid that looks just like a generic inquiry. You can drag the columns around, you can sort, you can filter, you can page through records. And so dropped that on LinkedIn last night, got some, just like as a teaser, and got some positive feedback. So that's going to be a fun project that I'll be working on more in the coming months. And so I thought I'd mention it here since we're on a tangent already, and I think it fits in well with hosting and accessing your data.
Yeah, someone did that as a hackathon, or some flavor of it, that you could run SQL or something. Years and years. It was probably
I did not
four.
know that. Oh, I have to look that up.
And and yeah, I'm surprised it has not made it into the product, and I'm excited to see you productizing something with that.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I don't think Acumatica will like it because they don't want you to have SQL access, but it's doable. And they talk about you being able to access your data. So we'll see if they try to squash it or not. But well, yeah, we'll see. It'll be an interesting ride.
Now, I think I saw in the post you can run, you can execute not only selects, but you can execute creates and
That's a little
inserts.
dicier, but yeah, I mean, theoretically, and I haven't tried this yet. I know you can create a view. I haven't tried creating a stored procedure and executing it, but I don't see why you couldn't. One use case I've thought of is putting all your logic for like basically creating a data warehouse, but inside of Acumatica, and just storing all your data in your own tables and just wrapping all your logic into a stored procedure. So then all you'd have to do is execute that stored procedure, simple code, but we'd like to add into the product the ability to schedule SQL statements. So you could schedule your executes or schedule whatever code you want to run at night. And then essentially you're creating a data warehouse that does the heavy processing at night. And then I've got, nice reportable data that I can run on during the day. I think that's a cool use case. We don't have the scheduling feature in there yet, but that's something on our roadmap.
Nice. Now, if someone's on a shared instant or a shared infrastructure of Acumatica where there's multiple instances, would they be restricted to their company number? Or
So you're not restricted to your tenant, and that's why I
yeah,
think Acumatica will not, be thrilled about it. But I haven't tried this yet. I don't know in a SaaS environment if you could access other databases like with sys databases or something like that. I think I've tried it on one SaaS environment already, and they are running Microsoft SQL Server. Like I thought it was version 2016, which is kind of old, but it's not that big of a deal. I haven't tried though sys databases. I've tried sys tables that work, but I don't know
okay.
about actually. Yeah, that could be an issue. But I think I'm theoretically I'm thinking about the installation process of Acumatica, and you do have to create a user that has access to the database. So I would think you wouldn't be able to query outside
Oh,
of your
true.
database. I think that it would only be a problem in multi-tenant environments, but I don't know who really uses that outside of MYOB. And MYOB runs on MySQL, and this would just support Microsoft SQL Server. To, it's different languages, right? So you wouldn't be able to run it on MySQL. So I think we're okay there, but hey, it's who knows, right? I just put a teaser post last night just to make some noise, and it'll be a fun ride. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that'd be something to test, and it'd be something to say, hey, you know what? We want to create some safeguards on our own to make sure it doesn't get
Yeah, that we've
crushed.
talked about that too. Like we could maybe restrict it to a tenant somehow. I don't know exactly how to make it more of a kosher product. Right now, it's just more of a cool idea.
Yeah.
And I think there's, it's like Velixo, right? Velixo really, the main thing they do is connect you to Excel. And there's already a huge amount of capability there and a huge audience for that. This is not quite as big as Excel, but SQL is a pretty big crowd as well, and even more in terms of capability. And all we're doing is trying to connect the Acumatica SaaS world to the SQL world that so many people already know. And this already accomplishes that. So there's just so many ideas going through my head of what you could do with it. But yeah, it'll be a fun ride.
Yeah, one of the things that we deal with is because we'll create other shared databases, or we'll have other databases on the same server, or we'll create shared servers or other databases on the same server, so we can access other pieces of information that we collect in whatever ways we need to, and if we want to get access to that in Acumatica, we always have to, okay, let me, we're not going to publish at night or during the day. So we'll create the DAC, wait to publish at night, and then publish at night. And that creates a delay from being able to access that information. If you could just create that view or whatever it is, a new table, and be able to access it through a little interface like that, that'd be nice, at least to start to play with it.
That's totally a use case I've thought of. I mean, yeah, at night you connect it to the data access class, but like you're still trying to get the logic right a lot of times, right? What am I filtering on? What tables? I might have my columns right, but I might not have the data right. So I can still massage that during the day, if my data access class part isn't changing. Yeah, I've totally
Yeah.
thought about that. It gets you to your end result faster. Yeah, absolutely. So anyways, there's a plug for AccuSQL. Anything else we want to plug while we're at it?
I don't know your sponsors anymore, so.
Well, hey, I think we are coming to the top of the hour, and I do have to ask Dakota, did I pronounce your last name right? I usually ask beforehand, and I forgot. Or
Dakota
is it
Clum, yeah.
Clum? It is. Okay. All right.
Clum, you did it. You did it.
All right. Phew. Phew. All right. I
Perfect.
apologize. I normally try to ask ahead of time. Well, guys, sounds like you're working on some cool stuff. I think you've got a future in the Acumatica space in some capacity, and it'd be interesting to see how that plays out for you over the coming years.
We're excited. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, any stuff that we missed that you had on your list to bring up that we could catch at the end here? Or did we
Dakota, I'll
cover
pass it to you. There's a chance I talked a lot today.
I think we covered the main things. So, and thanks again, Tim, for having us on.
Absolutely. Thanks for making the time, and love to have you back on again to geek out about ChatGPT or whatever else we want to talk about.
We'll do. We'll make that happen.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of augforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.